As time moves us further away from catastrophic historical events, the lived experience of those events fades. The witnesses pass away, and the raw history loses its immediacy. This gap is occupied by cultural memory. It is a communal structure of stories, symbols, and monuments designed to represent a past that is no longer accessible through direct experience. Memory scholar James Young argues that this public memory is never a passive inheritance. He described it as a texture, an active construction woven by the specific artists, politicians, and architects who decide which version of history is preserved. The formal aesthetic choices made in literature, film, and architecture are the tools of this construction. They determine the audience's proximity to the event, manipulating empathy and guiding the viewer towards specific ethical conclusions. To understand how a society actually negotiates its collective guilt, we must dissect the specific mediums it uses to tell its own story. In literature, this mediation is governed by narrative ethics. Bernhard Schlink's novel *The Reader* demonstrates how fictional structures can guide and potentially misdirect our judgment of the past. Schlink uses a genre shift to manipulate the reader's role. The story begins as a taboo romance, casting the reader as a voyeur, before jolting into a courtroom drama that demands the reader become a judge. The novel centers on Hanna, a former SS guard who allowed prisoners to burn to death. The narrative attributes her complicity to a personal secret. She is illiterate. This shame supposedly drove her into the SS to avoid a promotion requiring her to read. This portrayal collapses when held against the historical reality of the female SS guards. Historical records show 100% of the 3,500 female guards were literate. It was a job prerequisite. They chose the SS for economic advancement, earning 178 Reichsmarks compared to 75 in factories. The role was administrative, requiring reading and writing. Complicity was a calculated career move. During post-war trials, actual perpetrators often claimed they were victims of a system they didn't understand. By fictionalizing Hanna as a victim of her own illiteracy, the novel mirrors this defense to generate unearned sympathy. Fictional narratives can misrepresent historical facts to create a muddled meditation on guilt, prioritizing a sympathetic aesthetic over the reality of perpetrator accountability. While fiction relies on character empathy, documentary film uses the mechanics of time and pacing to assign weight to the past. In the documentary Shoah, Claude Lanzmann used slow, lingering takes to emphasize the grueling nature of testimony and the physical presence of the past. Luke Holland's film Final Account takes a different approach, interviewing the last living participants of the Third Reich. Holland uses a rapid editing pace and keeps himself off camera. This speed prevents the viewer from settling into a comfortable detachment. The camera captures a recurring psychological profile. Subjects who distance themselves from the crimes, feign ignorance of nearby atrocities, and prioritize the social status they once held under the regime. Holland's interviews reject the myth of the isolated monster. He focuses instead on the common functionary, citizens who acquiesced to authority and fulfilled a tyrant's wishes without question. This rapid documentary pacing forces an urgent recognition of how complicity functions, leaving the viewer with no room to look away. Beyond text and film, history is mediated through physical space. These sites of memory, or lieux de mémoire, anchor the past in the landscape. The monument carries an inherent risk. When a society delegates its memory to stone, it may feel divested of the internal obligation to remember. The object takes on the burden, allowing the public to become forgetful. In reunifying Germany, the debate over how to represent the Holocaust led to a rejection of literal, figurative statues. Heroic imagery was seen as an attempt to fix meaning too cleanly. This tension was evident in the Neue Wache Memorial. Its Christian-coded Pietà, a mother cradling a dead son, was criticized as an inappropriate metaphor for the Holocaust. Peter Eisenman designed the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. 2,700 abstract concrete slabs offer no names or instructions on how to feel. The architecture creates spatial alienation. As the visitor moves into the grid, the floor dips and the pillars rise, narrowing the sky. This radical design forces a solitary encounter with disorientation and loss. To ground this abstraction in history, an information center was built beneath the memorial, providing the names and data that the abstract slabs above lack. However, this lack of labels has led to the Holocaust phenomenon, where tourists use the site for selfies and self-promotion, treating the abstract blocks as a playground. The paradox of the physical monument is clear. If the design is too abstract, it invites trivialization, allowing self-presentation to override contemplation. Memorials function as values made visible, projecting a society's chosen moral priorities into the physical landscape. Germany chose to build 0 monuments to the Wehrmacht, explicitly rejecting the myth of the clean soldier, choosing instead to focus public memory on the victims of the state's crimes. These architectural and narrative choices reflect a national commitment to collective responsibility, a refusal to let the past become a comfortable, settled history. This deliberate national penance stands in contrast to the commemorative landscape of the United States. Across the American South, monuments valorizing the Confederacy were erected to sustain a specific white supremacist ideology, using the heroic mode to ignore the reality of slavery. The emergence of memorials to the victims of American terror, like the monument to Emmett Till, marks a shift toward a more honest and difficult national memory. The manipulation of empathy in fiction, the urgency of documentary pacing, and the alienation of abstract architecture all demonstrate that memorialization is an active, ongoing participation in history. Ultimately, memory without consequence is destructive. The moment a monument simply blends into the landscape, the historical lesson is completely lost.